17.
So we need to get the people that come from the municipal council and stuff like that. And the representative to introduce themselves. And then we said, wants to introduce themselves. So, okay.
Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do this.
During this part.
You'll do all that there. Yeah. And then when you turn that over to me, turn that over to that.
Time there, but just if anyone wants to speak, they can just come to me and then I'll write it down. I think that was it.
Okay, just so.
If anyone wants to speak about it.
Okay, well, you guys all want to speak to this, right? Do you want to? Here, here's my tip.
The thing that happened in Toronto was terrible. Somebody did that on purpose. I feel sure of it.
Yeah, I think you might be right.
Oh.
That's good.
I'll go on.
That was a busy day. Wasn't that having a dozy day?
There you go.
Let's give her.
Make sure you tell them this loud.
I'll let you do.
Good afternoon. My name is Shane Thompson. I'm the chairperson for the Social Development Committee. And I'm here with my committee is the Standing Committee of Government Operations and Standing Committee of Social Development. So we're working together here. So we are on live. We're streaming live on YouTube with our website, so people are aware of that. So we're broadcasting out there. It's through the Legislative Assembly's website. So at this point in time, I would like to turn over the mic to the member you most are familiar with, Mr. Tom Beaulieu.
Okay, Mr. Chair, thank you very much, everyone. Before we start, one of our conventional things we do is we say a prayer. So ask if everyone could just stand up and we'll open with a prayer. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for asking me to do a prayer. Today I just want to pray to the Lord, our Creator, for guidance as we go through this important legislation presented by the government that's going to, I think, change the lives of many people in the Northwest Territories. I pray today that we're able to go through this legislation, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions, and we'll go through this, and we will, I again pray that we are able to do this meeting with respect and dignity appropriate of the positions we hold and the importance of this legislation. Amen. Okay, I'd like to start by introducing the people that we have here with us today. I'm going to start with our chairman, Mr. Shane Thompson. Shane's representative from Nahen Bay, represents Fort Simpson, Wrigley, Jean Marie, Liard, Sambuca, and Nahanni Butte. And we have Julie Green next to Shane. Julie represents Yellowknife Center in one of the ridings in the city of Yellowknife. Michael Nadley, also on the committee. Michael represents Decho. Decho covers Fort Providence, Kikisa, Enterprise, and Hay River Reserve. We got R.J. Simpson here. He represents Hay River North, one of the two ridings in Hay River. Our staff are Megan Welsh, research analyst. Jennifer Frankie Smith is our committee clerk, and Chris Cartwright, our technical support. I'd like to I'd like to actually do something a little bit different, and that's to give the mic to Frank and ask everybody if they could introduce themselves, and then some of the people are actually here in official capacity, like Warren's here representing the Métis. So I just want to get that done as for the record, and also, like I said, we're streaming on Facebook. So I'm going to start with that, and we're going to get back and turn the floor back over to Shane. Okay, Frank.
Frank Fabia, Daniel Community Council. I also sit on the Fort Res Métis Council.
Brandy Marsh, the Hamlet of Fort Resolution.
Angela McKay, Hamlet of Fort Resolution.
Paul Miller, Fort Resolution. Tom McCall, the interpreter. Greg Villeneuve, Hamlet, Fort Res. Warren Noel, Fort Res Métis Council.
I'm Krista Curry, I'm a community adult educator.
Cheryl Lafferty, Fort Resolution. Sherry Strad.
Rachel Lafferty, Daniel McQuarrie.
Trudy King.
Linda McKay.
Liza Mandeville, Fort Resolution, Daniel McQuarrie. I go to Aurora College.
Mary Jane Beaulieu from Port Resolution.
I'm Lucy Beaulieu. Valmont Below, Fort Resolution.
Okay, thank you, everyone, and then I'll have turn the floor back over to Shane. Shane?
Thank you, Mr. Beaulieu. Members, do we agree with the agenda before us? Agreed? Could I get a motion to adopt the agenda? Mr. Natalie. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Declaration of conflict of interest. Do any members have a conflict of interest regards to any items on this agenda? Seeing none, we will proceed. At this point in time, I would like to thank everybody for showing up and being part of this is our first hearing as we go on our tour. At this point in time, I'd like to again turn the floor to Mr. Beaulieu.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I'm going to read a bit of a script and then we'll get started. Open the floor up for comments and questions. On April 17th, April 2017, federal government introduced a bill to legalize cannabis in Canada. Bill C-45 deals with federal licensing and the oversight of the cannabis supply chain. The bill also sets regulatory standards to protect public health and safety. This means the federal government will manage all cannabis production and distribution. Offenses and procedures relating to impaired driving are set out in Bill C-46. Right now, we assume that these bills will be passed. When that happens, the government of Canada legalizes cannabis across the country. The Northwest Territories will need local rules for cannabis control, including rules for the use, safe and transportation of cannabis, rules for youth, rules for smoking in public places. To create these rules, which will pick up where the federal government legislation leaves off, the government of Northwest Territories will introduce Bill 6, the Cannabis Legislation and Regulation Implementation Act. Bill 6 proposes two new laws for the cannabis control and the Cannabis Products Act and the Cannabis Smoking Control Act. This also proposes amendments to current laws on impaired driving found in the Territorial Motor Vehicles Act to address drug-impaired driving. We know that many Northerners have already shared their views with the government during its community engagement last year. The government incorporated that feedback into Bill 6. Then once this bill was introduced in the Legislative Assembly, it was referred to the Standing Committee so we could do our own work through the review, and that's our committee here. The bill touches on many different areas, from cannabis control to road safety. That means that it touches on the jobs of multiple standing committees. So that is for that clarification is that we are the Standing Committee on Social Development, which would be responsible for justice and health. That's also involved in this bill. And then there's also a Government Operations Committee, which actually RJ sits on. But that committee, with one of our representatives, Sonny Blake, from Mackenzie Delta, is traveling with the Government Operations Committee. Okay, this bill, together our role as regulators is to look at how this bill might be improved, to find questions that need to be answered, and to hear from the public. That's why we are here today. Copies of the bill are available on the table, and there are some additional written materials. It is important to keep in mind neither the committee nor the government will change or overrule the federal legislation. Cannabis will be legalized once the federal legislation has been passed. However, the Northwest Territories does have the authority over some important decisions, where we have prepared a handout that shows where the Northwest Territories has jurisdiction, and that's what we'd like to hear from you here today. For example, the bill proposes a minimum age of 19 years for cannabis possession, consistent with the liquor laws. The bill also proposes options for community plebiscites on cannabis control, but with some restrictions, the zero tolerance for drug impairment in novice drivers 21 and under, and commercial drivers. You'll see that the bill also talks about rules for cannabis production and sales in our territory, rules for smoking cannabis in public places, guidelines for signs in cannabis stores, and rules for young people. We also expect that many Northerners will be interested in talking about the government's proposed limit sales of into the existing liquor stores. If you would like to share your views with us today, please let the clerk know. They'll be sure to get you on the list. So we'll also accept written submissions by postal mail or email until Friday, May the 4th, 5 p.m. One final piece of housekeeping. Please remember that all submissions will be a part of official committee records and may be reflected in the final report. Any submissions made during this meeting may also be televised or broadcast via social media. Thank you. I'm going to have Shane continue with the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Beaulieu. Thank you very much for providing this information. I'd like to thank everybody and your patience for allowing this introduction so we can get this information out to everybody. With members' agreement, we can now open the floor. Do members agree? Agree. Thank you very much. We do have a list. Miss Frankie Smith Lafferty, Miss Frankie Smith, sir, Jennifer. Jennifer has a list there. We already have one person that has provided her name forward, Miss Brandy Mersch, who will open the floor to her. And if you wish to comment, just participate, just go see her and sign up there, or put your hand up. Thank you.
Thanks, Shane. I have a few questions and concerns regarding this legalization of cannabis. The first one starting that we're legalizing this for the age of 19. We were told at prior meetings it'll be sold in liquor stores, and that this is a bill we can no longer stop. It's going through. The federal government has already pushed it through, and we just have to live with it. So with that being said, what happens with the health officials, the doctors and that have done their studies for years and years that state individuals under the age of 25 should not be using it? It comes along with You ask hard drug users the first drug they started out with, they're going to tell you it's cannabis. Using that for years, some go on to harsher, and legalizing it in these small communities, our communities are being set up for harder drugs to come in, because these drugs are going to be sold one way or another. We have marijuana here, cannabis, and if that market's being taken away, other drugs will find its way into this community. These dealers will sell harsher drugs to individuals. Being a parent, I talk to my son about drugs, and marijuana being one of them. I tell him, you don't use it, it can harm, everything all parents tell their kids, not expecting their kids to go up to be drug addicts. But now the government is legalizing it. It's okay now, after 19, and their brains aren't even fully developed. So with that, you worry about your kids smoking a cigarette because it's legal. But now we have to worry about our kids smoking cannabis because it's legal. And they're not developed. The government is pushing this through because I understand the federal is saying it has to be done. It's passed, it's coming through, it's legalized. But is the government willing to put more money where it's needed for these drugs that are coming in? In these smaller communities, we have housing units, 3, 4 at a time. Are you guys prepared to put more money into the housing to get proper ventilation systems in all these homes? So that families living next door that don't smoke marijuana or their families are not subjected to have to smell it? Is the government prepared to put more money into communities for our youth to get help that will become addicted to this drug? How are you guys prepared to stop individuals and workplaces from using cannabis? Right now, in the news, everybody must have heard about it, the plane crash. The pilot had high levels of THC in his system. That airline is being sued right now because it took the life of the pilot, his co-pilot, and almost 2 passengers on that plane. What about the bus drivers that are driving kids to and from school? The drivers of trucks? Because regardless of how safe you guys are trying to make cannabis sound, it's no different than alcohol. It blurs your judgment. And with this being legalized, there's so many more issues is going to arise from it. And I hope the government's prepared to have more money put out, to help individuals that become addicted at very young ages. Because now marijuana isn't looked at as something taboo. It's legalized now. It's okay. Just like how smoking is okay. But we have some provinces now banning smoking in a vehicle. You get fined for that. But we're stopping that in these provinces, and then on the other hand, we're saying, oh, it's okay for every individual to carry around 30 grams in their pocket and smoke in their own homes when these homes have young children. In this last week, we've seen the government issue, the health offices issue, all these things about smoking, marijuana when you're breastfeeding, the use of marijuana while you're pregnant. But yet, when it's legalized, you're going to be allowed to smoke in your home. There's so many studies that prove what just cigarette smokes can do to a child through secondhand smoke. How is cannabis any different? It's worse. And these kids just don't have the say to get up and leave that home when it's being smoked in there. You know, the 30 grams per person is an outrageous amount of cannabis. So when a get-together of 10 people, they can have up to a pound. That's what 30 grams per person equals. 10 people equals a pound. And they can smoke it all day long if they wanted to, and nobody can say anything to them. At a meeting we were at last month, I was told, well, we're hoping if we legalize it, people won't smoke in their homes around their kids. I don't smoke. My husband doesn't smoke. It doesn't make it okay for somebody not to want to smoke in front of their kids, but go to the ballpark, the soccer field, outside the store, outside the community hall, and smoke around other people's kids. That's not right. People are not allowed to walk around with open liquor, but they're going to be allowed to walk around and smoke. You guys say you're following the Liquor Act. The only thing you guys are really following is the age limit. And even health officials are against that because of studies that have been done for years and years and years over the effects of an undeveloped brain on cannabis. I've been against it being legalized. And not because I'm against people that use it. They want to smoke it. I'm not here to judge them. But I'm worried about our youth. Because like I said, every drug addict you ask what they started with, they'll tell you it's marijuana, a little bit of weed here and there, and it's escalated. So what is the government going to do to help these smaller communities where we have youth that are going to be falling into this? Are you guys prepared to give more money to make sure that doesn't happen? And how can you make sure that doesn't happen? But yet it's being pushed through. And I was told, oh, well, the reason it's pushed through is because we did an online survey. An online survey, and everybody thought it was a great idea. I asked how they came up with the amount of 30 grams on an individual. Oh, well, that was the good number on the online survey. But come on, you guys all know what 30 grams of weed looks like. That's a crazy amount. And on top of that, every home's able to have 4 plants. But we live in communities that our houses are so close together. We have housing units, mothers that have young children, that they don't do it, but maybe the next door neighbor does it. And you know, having 4 plants in a home, that's strong. But yet, housing isn't going to get money to put proper ventilation systems in here? And when it's no fault of the person that's living next door that chooses not to do the drug, this is forced on them. They need a house to live in. They take what they can get. They don't have a say. So it's the government that's pushing this on, that's legalizing it. I think it's up to the government to make sure housing gets more money to put proper ventilations in these houses. So that families that don't smoke aren't subjected to have to smell it. And that's my concerns around it.
apologize, I'm not going to stand up anymore here, if you don't mind. Thank you, Brandy, very much for your presentation. I do have a couple of questions for you. So I guess the first thing we have to realize, the federal government has made this decision. So whether we, as a government of Northwest Territory, says no, they're still going to impose it. It's going to happen. So we have to make it the best bill as possible. So when you talk about the amount of 30 grams, do you think that we should be looking at reducing that amount? I'll start with that first question to you, because we would look at trying to come up with some solutions, and one of them is the amount of cannabis that they can hold on their possession, how many plants in their homes. So I guess my first question is, what is your recommendations? Are you telling this committee that we should look at as in the amount?
That amount is a lot. And like I said, you guys know what 30 grams looks like. And for that to be carried around by one individual, you know, and I brought up the thing about 10 people sitting around as a get-together. Is it okay, does the government feel that it's okay that those 10 people can have a pound of weed sitting on a table in a party? That's okay? Because that's a lot of drugs. A lot of drugs. And then what happens if in this home there's kids there? Are you guys following the same act as if you were to walk into a house and there'd be a party there? And young minors in that home? Can those kids be taken out for their safety? Nobody seems to have that answer for me. And I've asked it more than once. Because like I said, an adult can make their own decisions. They can do what they want. They're of age. But these children aren't. These children don't have a say.
I guess, Brandy, I'm coming back to the question is, what do you think the amount individuals should be able to possess in their possessions, the number of plants they should have in their homes? Because right now, the 30 grams and the 4 plants are something that the federal government has come up with and saying that's the max that people can have. The government of the Northwest Territories can reduce that amount as part of the bill. So this is where those are some of the things we can change and we can make recommendations on. So that's what I'm trying to find out from you is, 30 grams is a lot, and you use 10 people. And again, I don't know what 30 grams is. Honestly, I don't know what it looks like. Thank God. But the question is, what do you think a good number is? I mean,
and that I can't answer because, like I said, I don't use.
Okay.
I don't know what an amount a user would use in a day. But I know 30 grams is a lot. And I don't think an individual can smoke 30 grams a day. Or maybe they could. I don't know. But I just know 30 grams is an awful lot of drugs for one individual.
Okay. Well, that's honestly, and I thank you very much for that part. I guess the next question that I have, we talked about housing and ventilation. So are you saying as a recommendation that the government of Northwest Territories, if cannabis is going to be allowed to be smoked in housing units, that they need to have a good ventilation system in place?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions from the committee here on this, Ms. Green?
Thank you for your comments. One of the things the government is planning to do to deter youth from using the drugs is to fine children who have possession of 5 grams or less, take them home to their parents, confiscate the drugs, and fine them $200. Do you think that that is a good way to deter youth from using cannabis?
I can't say that if that's good or not. But at least you guys are thinking about it. It's very hard for me with this whole thing because my main concern, like I've said, is the youth. And now if you find these kids, so what if it happens more than once? Then what? Are these kids going to be taken in front of a judge? Are we going to start making criminals out of these kids after we, the government, has legalized it?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so the government has chosen 5 grams as the dividing line there. So if youth have more than 5 grams, they can be charged, and they will go through the court system. That's my understanding. But if they have less than 5 grams, then they won't be. As I mentioned, what will happen is the drugs will be confiscated. The children or youth will be taken home to their caregivers and told why, and they'll be subject to a fine. So that's what they have in mind. I think the government's intention is not to create a new class of criminal records based on use of cannabis that they've just legalized, just exactly as you said. That would be counterproductive. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else wish to present or have a provide their comments or thoughts to this Bill 6? Anybody? Oh, yeah. There we go.
My name is Liza. I go to Royal College, and for me, I use it because of my health wise. I mean, it makes me eat, makes me sleep, whatnot, and for another thing, around here in this community, I see a lot of people, I'm not saying names, but people that work for government, people that drive vehicles around here, they all smoke, so I don't see what's the problem. The worst problem I see is people wandering around being drunk and like intoxicated people all the time. That's all I could say.
I'm just wondering, because I know, like you said, the federal government is going to legalize it, and for small communities like Fort Resolution, could it be a money-making thing for certain people, since there's no jobs around?
Could you clarify that question again? Sorry?
For the sales of marijuana in small communities, there's going to be no sales, right? Is it going to be sold in liquor stores?
Okay, first, I'll answer the first question right now, and then we can go on to your second question here. So presently, the government of Northwest Territories has identified 7 facilities to sell the product, which is a liquor store. So for you guys, it would be close, would be Hay River, Fort Smith. Then there's also Fort Simpson, Yellowknife has 2, Inuvik and Norman Wells. So right now, those are the locations that the community or the government of Northwest Territories has identified presently to sell cannabis. There, after a period of time, then they're going to look at expanding it, but right now, those are the 7 facilities that are going to be selling the product.
Okay, because like with alcohol, you have liquor stores, and you have, you have bars, right? So, is it going to work the same way with marijuana, where you can go to a bar and buy marijuana and smoke a joint and have a drink, or is
So right now, like I said, it's the 7. No, right now the government of Northwest Territories has not looked at going to use alcohol a similar direction alcohol has gone to a bar. What they're looking at after a period of time is the opportunity to have stores or sell retail sales in the communities should they wish, if there's a business, somebody that wishes to do that. But the government has to make that decision. But I think some of the questions is, one question I may have, we'll back to you if you have any other questions, and then I can go on to the next thing.
Like in the future, if they bring it to small communities, can homeowners open up marijuana cafe?
So right now, the government of Northwest Territories, like I said, have identified the 7. Then they're also looking at the opportunity to, whether it's a cafe / a store. Those are some of the things that the government will be looking at later on. But right now, the government has only identified the 7 stores as the opportunity to sell as they move forward. They're trying to, and I could be corrected here, but what they're trying to do is get the product out there and being able to provide it to the public. So one question somebody asked about is, or the comment is, what can the community do? The community, if you're not one of the 6, well, actually all communities, they can have a plebiscite. So a plebiscite basically gives the community the opportunity to question the government or tell the government that the residents wish or do not wish to have the product in their community. So for the smaller communities such as Fort Res that don't have liquor stores, you guys have a quicker time, because once a cannabis store is in the community, then there cannot be a plebiscite. So the 6 centers, the 6 communities that do have liquor stores, they're going to have their plebiscite. They're going to have to start working on it quicker, because as soon as that product is sold in the liquor stores, there won't be an opportunity to do a plebiscite. So if the community wishes, Fort Res wishes to have a plebiscite, they can contact the Minister of Finance and ask to have a plebiscite, and then there is a process to it. And everybody understands what we're talking about, plebiscite and that there? Okay. Any other comments, questions? Does the committee have anything else? Okay, Randy? Yes, we just want to make sure we're recording, and it's not so much for here, it's for, because of the live streaming, so we want to make sure that people out there hear what we're talking about. Ms. Bursch?
So when somebody goes to work intoxicated, you can tell they're intoxicated. They can be taken to the cop station. They can be given a breathalyzer. Right there, the results are in. Over 0.8, you're fined, right? How are you guys, well, WCB, I guess, is able to identify, because to find THC in the system, it stays in there a long time, weeks, and you don't get your test results back just like that, blowing into a tube. It's done by blood or urine that has to be sent out. So how is the government prepared to deal with that issue?
Very good question. So again, I guess we're part of the government, but we're not part of the government. We're going out doing the bill, so we can actually tell you what we know and what we understand. So my understanding from the presentation from the minister and WSCC is that there is a process. They have a process. They're educating their employees, the people, the businesses out there, explaining everything. And Ms. Bursch is very correct. THC stays in the system a long time. We know that. We understand that it stays there a long time, and there is consequences to if you are positive test. So there is, like I said, WSCC is actually looking at it. They're doing the research, making sure that not only they're educating the businesses, but the employees, so that you're trying to educate people through that process, making people understand. But it's the same thing with people on the influence. If a worker or a boss figures you're under the influence, they can refuse you to allow you to go into work. And am I missing anything else into this? With this? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, with WSCC, essentially now people go to work high. And what they're looking at is, are you safe to work? And so they're going to amend the legislation, and we haven't seen that because I think it's regulation, so we haven't seen that yet, but that's what we're making comments on. As far as the testing, an employer won't be able to test someone for cannabis. But what they're introducing now, because you mentioned that it's THC stays in the blood and urine, it has to be sent out. What they're going to be using is these oral screening devices where they swab the inside of your mouth, and they can tell if THC has been basically inhaled in the past few hours. So that's what the RCMP are beginning to use, and they've sent people out for training to use those, and they've sent people out for training to basically do the roadside test where you just you ask questions and you look at people's eyes and that kind of stuff. And so they are putting money into that. There's a long way to go with that because I think they've only got a handful of people trained, but they're still working on that. But it's good to hear those concerns. Like that's what the government hands us the legislation, then we go out and find out what the people think of the legislation. So yeah, Shane says we're the government. I always like to think that no, I work for the people. I happen to be in a government building, but I'm not the government. And so yeah, that's all these questions that you're asking. That's what we're asking too, and we're trying to incorporate that into the legislation. So that's all I have to add. Thanks.
Thank you, RJ. And just to follow up on what RJ Simpson talked about, there's 12 people that have been trained to do that right now with the RCMP for testing and that, and WSCC is actually working on following up with the training as well. So right now we have that with the RCMP, and yes, it's very short. It's not enough right now, but they're looking at 69 to be certified over the next 4 years, I believe.
I know that health stores sells kits that you can take before you get tested, and your THC level won't show up. So I'm just wondering, if you take this kit and take it before you get tested, would it show up in your swab? Because I know it wouldn't show up in your urine.
That's a very good question. I don't have the answer. Go ahead, RJ.
I did a little research on this, not much. I'm not an expert on this, but basically, if you inhale something, a bit of it is captured, in the saliva in your cheeks. And so, do these mouth swabs work perfectly? I don't know. I mean, could someone just use a lot of mouthwash? Could someone brush their teeth? Could they, eat something sour and that would take it away? There's still a lot of questions. I think these have been used in, England and Australia for quite a while now, a few years, and there's still questions about their validity. So, we don't have those kind of answers for you right now. And I mean, that's when the federal government says, okay, we're going to legalize this thing that's been illegal for, nearly 100 years. We got a lot of catching up to when it comes to finding out, how things are going to work. So.
Sorry, Randy. Yeah.
With this being legalized now, you guys it's put through, it's legalized, but yet don't want individuals using it in a workplace, but it's legalized. Somebody can go home at 5 o'clock and they can drink. They'll pass out. They're sober. They're ready to go the next day, 12, 14 hours later, whatever, however long, how much they drank for it to be out of the system. Now, what if the person has a smoke 2 or 3 hours before they go to work? Or on their breaks?
I'll turn this to the screen.
Well, we asked these questions on Friday, and there was a rep from the WSCC there, and she was emphatic that there is zero tolerance for impairment at work. And so if the employer has reason to believe that the person is impaired, then they can require testing. And the bottom line is they have to be fit to work. And so, the question is, are they going to be fit to work if they smoke immediately before? Not if they don't pass the field sobriety tests. They won't be fit to work. But as RJ said, there's a long way to go with this, because this type of testing is new and there aren't a lot of people trained on it. So the big deal will be to make sure that there are enough people trained on it, that if you report impairment, somebody is there to verify that and do something about it.
And with the drug being legalized now in the Northwest Territories, are we going to get a treatment center?
So, good question. Right now, social development did attend a tour on our treatment centers right now, and we don't have the capacity. I'll be very upfront and honest to people. I've gone to the tours. I was supportive of having a treatment center, but if we're going to do a treatment center, we need the support. We need to have the staff. We need to make sure that we give options to people. Right now, the government of Northwest Territories has 4 treatment centers that they work on down south. And right now, this is where we're looking at. And we cannot afford to run a treatment center that's being offered down south right now. We don't have the staff. We struggle right now to get doctors and nurses in our communities. And right now, a treatment center, it's not feasible right now.
Well, with the federal government being the one that passed this through, couldn't you guys lobby them for money for one?
We've been lobbying the government for housing, treatment centers, a number of things right now. I know that from cabinet, listening to cabinet talk. I know some of our members have had the opportunity to go down to Ottawa and lobby. So, yeah, there's a long list of things that we're trying to lobby and trying to address. We also talk about on the land, the opportunity to be on the land in that, and those options are being looked at. But right now, to build a treatment center and to run it efficiently and effectively for the residents of Northwest Territories and to provide them with choice, we can't afford it. And I know it sounds like it's a government stance, and I'm staying on the government side on this, but I've just seen with my own eyes the benefits of the opportunity we have with the treatment centers down south that we have contracts with, and we cannot afford to do it. And if the bottom line is about the residents of the Northwest Territories and what's best for them, and what's best for them right now is giving them these options that are available to us. I understand we have lots of addictions, and cannabis coming on is going to add to more addictions. We're going to see a huge increase of people using it. That's my personal belief, because it's going to be legalized. We're going to see more people doing it, using it. But again, the challenge is that a treatment center involves specialists, and to have specialists in place that we can hardly, like I said, doctors and nurses here in the north, we won't be able to do that right now. I honestly don't see it. I'd love to see one. I wish we had the capacity of having a treatment center on the land, treatment centers, also having doctors and nurses in each of the communities for the residents, so that we can make it a very healthy community where we live. But right now, that's the challenge. Like, that's my challenge, and when I look at it, and if I can send somebody out for treatment, again, at the end of the day, the person needs to ask. That was probably something we learned right away. They need to step up and say they want support, and then go there. And when we talked to some of the people that have gone out for treatment from the Northwest Territories, they wanted the options. They wanted the opportunity to have the ability to select a facility that was their need, that met their needs. And so, again, as I think RJ talked about it, we're here for the people. We're not here for the government, we're here for the people, but we also have to be realistic in where our needs can be met. And right now, the needs that are helping our residents is the treatment centers down south.
But when they come home?
You're talking about aftercare?
Yep.
And that there is something that we talked about through our trip report. If you look at our hand search and that's one of the things we talked about, with the importance of aftercare. And if Ms. Green doesn't mind, I would like to turn the mic over to her, and she can talk a little bit more about aftercare, or if you feel comfortable with that.
So what we requested for aftercare is, first of all, that nobody is discharged into homelessness from treatment centers. We find that that does happen now. So you have somebody who is an addict and they've been couch surfing or living in a shelter, living in a place where other people are using, and discharging people into a home of their own, a unit of their own, is really important to helping them maintain their sobriety. And we've also looked at the possibility of the treatment centers down south providing enhanced aftercare for people. Right now it's web-based or telephone-based, but I think that that could be strengthened within the communities, that there be peer support available, if not AA, then some kind of one-on-one support that could be set up. So we recognize that it can be very challenging for people coming out of treatment to go back into the same situation that they came out of as an addict, and to succeed in that. And to be perfectly honest with you, some of the people we met weren't planning to go home for a while. They wanted to really establish their sobriety before they went back to their communities. So it's not, we don't have all the answers, but we are aware that that's a really important dimension of having the addict succeed in his sobriety.
Thanks.
Sorry. Sorry. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Then, yeah, right after.
Yeah. Is it on?
Yeah, it's on. It's recording for.
Okay. I just want to start by saying I kind of feel like I'm coming down with the blues, so just let me know if I don't make sense. I guess it's for us in this little community, we all know each other, you know, both the brights of us and the darks of us, because we lived together for so long and we're close. So a lot of this stuff that we are looking at here, we kind of have an idea of how we can be impacted, or to what degree that we want to be impacted, and how we want to play a role in this process. So I guess my first question is, what are we doing here? What's the purpose with this committee? Because it's hard for us to read all this, memorize it, and give it to you all back in the way that we think we can help you without a certain amount of time for us to think about it and maybe talk to each other about it. So is this our only means? Is this the only trip you're going to come here for? And the other ways we can contribute is through websites or mail or whatnot?
So so the purpose of this is we're trying to get input on Bill 6. So we're trying to get the communities and the residents input on Bill 6. We're trying to understand what your concerns are as we move forward. It's getting the residents' thoughts as we move forward on this bill. The second part is does that help that part?
Yeah,
okay.
I think it's kind of an interesting position you guys been placed in because of the status currently. It's criminal right now. So, as far as you're concerned, everyone here doesn't do it or wouldn't admit to do it, or because of that same fact. So it's hard to really get the kind of input. So it's precarious in that way. But I wanted to at least touch on a couple of things that I know is going to impact my community.
Can I just answer the second part of your question before you move on to that part? I don't want to cut you off, but because the second part of the question you asked, what other avenues are available to people? So people still can write to us. They can write letters to us, and we have the deadline as May 4th at 5 p.m. So it can be either in a letter or an email, so they can send that out. There's also through the Assembly, so assembly.gov.nt.ca website, so you're able to check onto that website and get more information and also provide feedback to us as well. So it's just not this here and this stops you from providing input. This is one of the steps that we're taking to provide opportunities for people to provide feedback.
Okay, so first of all, I should introduce myself. I sort of missed it. My name is Patrick Simon. In this capacity, I'm here as a Hamlet counselor, and but I'm also, for full disclosure, I'm also a band council. So I sit on the band council, and to really full disclose, I do partake in it myself. I don't know any legal ramifications come from it, but I think it's up to us to have honest discussions if we would really want to truly go through this issue, because it's a real complex issue, and it's something I think that we should discuss and we should deal with. There's a lot of things that people feel that should be okay, as long as they're grown-ups and they don't affect people in this particular topic. But there's a lot of, right now, it's just straight across. It's illegal no matter what. So it's, people have to live with that, have to deal with that as they either do it or they don't do it. But now that you introduce this law, you're going to introduce a lot of confusion, a lot of people, I guess, wondering, maybe stressing to exactly what this means to them personally, whether they're at home, whether they're in public buildings, whether they're in vehicles, whether they're driving, or whether they're passengering. And it's bad enough in this day and age. We have a lot of other issues to deal with and to stress about and to make sense of. So it's really important for us, especially here in Res, to really get this clear so that because the people of Res are honest people. They do follow laws and they do believe in these laws. But we also want to live together in a way that we could be clear about. And this is one of the things that may cause us to have difficulty, because some believe it's medicine, some believe it's illegal, some believe it's unhealthy. There's all kinds of different opinions on it. So for us, we certainly have some main questions. One is what's our role in terms of our community? What's our limits in that relation? What can we do, whether for or against these types of things? Because I know that you talked about restricting or limited restricting or special circumstances restricting. And for me, it's much like alcohol. So I suspect that it would be like alcohol. And I read in here it stated like 10 days. I'm not sure if that's a minimum or a maximum in terms of restriction. But I think in some of our events, Port Resolution traditionally has certain things. And our traditional cultural activities, we kind of tend to restrict that. And our activities are, not sure if it's 10 days, it may be longer. We do restrict alcohol at that time. And I would think, knowing my chief and my council, that this would probably happen in this respect also, that we request for that in and about our activities. We're not sure the limitations of that, but that's something we would have to think on. The age, that's something that, you know, it's hard to comment on age when right now anybody would do it regardless. And if it becomes legal, well, we set an age limit. Well, the ones that are doing it that are underage, well, that's a whole new issue that's going to be added, because right now it's illegal to everybody. And so we're going to have to think on that a little, because we certainly don't want to criminalize people. We want to provide opportunity for support and healing, and, you know, I, for one, you know, really know how hard it is to just say, well, I'm going to quit. And I'm sure a lot of people know that too, because we have a lot of healthy people in our community now, as opposed to when I was young. So we know that for me, age 19 seems okay in terms of alcohol. For me, 30 grams, and to be quite honest with you, I don't know of anybody walking around carrying 30 grams. And to me, it's a lot. Brandy is terribly right in that respect. It's a lot. And the only reason I suspect it occurs is because, you know, regardless of illegal now, people don't have the ability to just get it conveniently, so they have to, like, hide, transfer, and all this kind of stuff, and that's the only reason you'd have someone having a large amount. Unless he's a drug dealer, which is something here is still going to remain, and it might. So for us, you know, we may want to look at that, and although, given that we work through the issues of distribution, because for us in this community, we know that Hay River Liquor Store would be the ideal place. 30 grams in 1 week. Not sure there, depending on how much one consumes and at what status of their consumption is, whether they're beginners or old-time users. You know, it may be appropriate if you're transporting from Hay River to Res to exactly have that amount, because you're not going every day. So that's something we have to talk about to find out, because we don't want to you know, make new criminals or make it harder to navigate, or, you know, we just want people to try to live better and to relate better. And in this respect, this could impact us. We also want to look at distributions and sales in terms of our community. I know that it's stated in here that we have that ability right now to decide, and we may not. You know, we really have to discuss as leaderships, and we may. But for us right now, how we can visualize it is you either have to go to Hay River or you have to mail. We know that the way that it is happening now is, quite frankly, to be honest, unsafe, given that when I was young, you know, it was different. Now it may not even be cannabis you're buying. It could be in part of a lot of other drugs that can affect us in an unhealthy way. So with us being involved with the distribution, I'm hoping that can make it, and we're wondering how you're going to know that these drugs are what they say they are, because I know that there's a trick drug users use to pull you in by mixing, or we also feel that, I feel that we're driving. Right now it's illegal. Right now it's at the discretion of the police officer and however it could go down. But now that in terms of alcohol, we're very clear because we know exactly if you drink a beer or more, don't drive. Pretty much, depending on your weight or your body. And we know that you can blow into it and pretty well tell. At one time I did carry impaired test because I'm really staunch. I don't believe in drunk driving. You know, if I had my experiences with it, with family and with friends and with even personal myself. And I know that in this case it's going to be a little more complicated how we're going to tell when someone is intoxicated and at what level. And I do my research and I'm always interested in facts as I watch TV, read, go through the media. And I know that's a tough one for you guys, but it's one you guys are going to have to address because, you know, people all of a sudden are not going to just decide, well, I don't smoke and drive anymore. The ones that do and the ones that don't, you know. And I know that this legislation is not to complicate issues any further and make more criminals. It just wants to deal with issues a better way in a modern day. You know, people are more liberal. And so they want to see this law. And there's nothing we can do about it. But we can become educated and we can support each other and be honest and try to use it in a responsible manner, much like we can. So we also have to look at things like what's the supports, what's the mechanism in place for education. To be quite honest with you, if it was up to me personally, you know, for me personally, well, that's a different story. I've made my decision, and it's public around here, and public to anyone. I don't mind that. But for anyone else, I would say no. Don't do it. Not worth it. It's unhealthy. It costs too much. It takes too much time out of your lives. Sports will do the same thing. Because when I was young, sports did the same thing for me when I wasn't into it. So I wouldn't really recommend it to anyone for the simple basic reasons that it's just not worth it, it's not healthy, and it costs too much. In this day and age, you have to be economically wise in all the decisions in your life. For me, I would very much like to ensure that when we grow these plants, when we sell it, when we smoke it, that we do it because our community is so small, you know, we really make sure that when we set these limits that it's not standard across the board, that, you know, smaller, bigger centers, more people, less people, that it's taken in that consideration. So maybe in Yellowknife, if you draw a line around a school, you know, I don't know how much people you'll actually hit. In our small communities, that line would, you know, do other things. And we know that, you know, much like cigarettes and alcohol, that these public places and brandy's, right, it's going to be hard in terms of the streets. And you know, it's hard to figure out. For me, I would very be interested in knowing how you deal with that type of issue. We know when you grow cannabis, it's really strong and pungent, and no matter how much you try currently to keep it in your house, someone walking by is going to eventually find out. And if you continue to grow it, I think the amount of plants you have would give out a big, strong odor. My experience tells me it would. I'm not sure how that would be handled in terms of who can grow and where they can grow, because that may be an issue. I myself live by the school, across the road from the school, and I know that I probably shouldn't be growing in there, to be honest. Not outside, not even inside, because I don't have much money and I wouldn't be able to have a big exhaust, mechanism. So I can understand that aspect, and I can agree with those aspects. But for other people, they may feel different, so we have to really be clear on that. And I'm not sure, really, in terms of intoxication and public intoxication and how we determine that's going to be very hard unless you really get the science on that. I know with alcohol you could tell. And, if I looked around here, I could pretty well tell if anyone's drinking. We know each other so much, and we're so close. But I look around here, the experience that it was, I couldn't tell if anyone was smoking and to what level. So that would be a challenge, And I think more discussion should be done on that. But I think there's a high expectation that July 25th will come. Some people will cheer it, some people will dread it. But people want to be clear, because there's more talk in terms of, well, no, it's not going to be July 1st now, I'm going to delay it until the fall. So we want to know what that means in terms of July 1st with the honest person that may partake in this, in the proper area. What would that mean? Maybe you can answer that, because I know people would want to know. They don't want to just start lighting up and start going to jail because they misinterpret or misread the timelines.
Thank you. You had a lot of questions. I guess we'll just answer your last one first. So right now, the federal government has earmarked July 1st as the date it being legalized, but right now it most likely will not be July 1st. It's most likely going to be sometime in August when it's going to be legalized by the federal government. So until the federal government passes their legislation, cannabis will be still illegal until they pass the legislation. So we're doing our bill, so we're working on it and hopefully have it prepared so when the cannabis federal government legalizes it, then we're prepared to proceed. Right now, so in other words, short-term answer is it's illegal until the federal government makes it legal. Yeah.
I just want to thank you for all the comments. I want to follow up on one thing. You talked about you don't want to make criminals out of people with this legislation. And you mentioned the 30 grams. And I know that you won't be able to buy it here, so you'd have to go to Hay River. And I know that a lot of times if someone's going to Hay River, maybe they'll grab some groceries for you, they'll grab something from the liquor store or whatever the case may be. And so maybe there's 2 or 3 or 4 people who wanted, I was asking someone to pick up some cannabis from the liquor store. So do you think that 30 grams is reasonable for a small community where there is no, where it's not available to purchase? Is that a fair amount considering the fact that, someone might be just transporting stuff for a few of their friends? I was wondering what your take was on that. Thank you.
I think that for me, because I do understand what my friend Brandy is talking about. I really do. And but I do know how my community operates and how sometimes we're generous to a fault to each other. And you can't just say, well, no, I'm not going to get it because no, this person's not going to do you the next favor. So that one's going to be tough. In some degree, it is. In some degrees, it would be, just as you said, that people will grab more than 30 grams because their friend called them. You know, and as for me, sometimes I don't tell anyone I'm going to wherever, and I try not to answer my phone because I know that a lot of people will call, get this, grab that, and you know, I end up doing it because you know, I realize their situation, and I'm generous that way, and sometimes it, you know, I don't because sometimes it. You know, even with alcohol, I mean, you know, sometimes I'd grab more and I'd really have to consider whether I'm really transporting alcohol illegally because of, you know, people want you to pick up stuff like that. So in this case, it can be a circumstance, but they're going to do it anyways, regardless of what number that you're going to place on it. So I would go for a good healthy number for one individual, because if we get beyond that, you know, we could get to huge amounts. So for me, I could see this. It may be a little short or a little big, but it's in proximity to what I see in my community. And regardless, people are gonna do it anyways because they've done it all the time.
So just to come back to a couple other questions that you asked that really, well, the first one is, how can we assure the product is going to be the product? With the government, the federal government has regulations, and so any businesses or companies that are going to produce this product will have to follow those regulations. So they'll be tested by federal inspectors and that. So that will be done, and like it will be a guaranteed product from the federal government. So that's one of their rationales for the way we're doing it. But the other question, though, which I found really interesting, I haven't heard this one before, is restrictions on special events, how this will work. That there, I don't have the answer, but we're going to have to look into that because, as you said, when communities have special events, there is the opportunity to restrict alcohol coming in, you know, your spring carnivals and stuff like that. I've seen it happen before. Not just talking about this community, but I've seen it happen before. So it's a question that we're going to have to look into and find out and have an answer for not just yourself, but the rest of the territories, because that's a valid question. How are we going to be able to allow communities, should a store be brought in here, how can you regulate it if on special events? Do you have the ability to do that similar to what you did with alcohol? And if they're following the liquor process of how, you know, they're producing liquor, then or distributing liquor, they should be able to do that. But again, that's a very good question, and it's something that we need to look into. I think it should be, but again, we're going to have to find out the legal ramifications on that. So, do you have any other?
Yeah, I think I just want to finalize some of my points. I got a million questions, but we'll get to that eventually. But there's certain circumstances in which we want to be clear, like you know, maybe my friend doesn't smoke, but his other or her other, I don't want to pinpoint that, but does, and then and they go on a trip, and then how does that play? I know within that vehicle he can't, but what about her? Because I know these things happen, and then in this case, the police officer, because it's illegal, he just goes through the whole motion of whether addressing you or giving you a break or whatnot. In this case, how would that be dealt with? And I know that police officers have some training, but they're very, very limited. And then you guys tested a machine. We very much like to know some of those. I guess how those things went. Like how would you deal with situations like that? Also, that we know that the statement that in my own house I can consume alcohol and not beer. And I'm actually a bachelor, so I don't have to deal with the other complicated issues that parents would. And just certain occasions I do, so I could deal with that. But for me, I don't fear the police officer as he comes, as I partake into my, Budweiser during a hockey game, because I know our relationship in that respect. But when it comes to marijuana, I'm not quite sure about that, and I'm always mindful of my privacy and my security and my freedoms, and how this may or may not impact that. Is it a ticket for law enforcement officers or government to come into my bedroom? Because I know that currently, and I grew up in the Trudeau era way back, where governments had no business in our bedrooms. And in this case, I'm less so unsure, because some people are saying, well, it's only a way to make us, to make it harder for us, to give them more access to us, to restrict us more, in a sense, to have a role where it's kind of a place where we feel uncomfortable. So that has to be clear. I guess my final thing would be that for resolution, for Denunukwa, we have a lot of problems that we have to address, and both hidden and illegal and both legal. So when we pass this legislation, I'm not sure if it's going to add to that or not, because people are doing it as it is. We're hoping that it may provide you guys with the ability to support us more when we address these problems. I know that my chief, he's very staunch on providing culture and healing, but he really struggles with finding funding and programs and services to address a lot of the issues that come before us. And this may just give him more to have to deal with less resources. So we really feel that, that we have to look at adding more to the coffers in terms of prevention, in terms of the actual addiction, and in terms of the actual, adjustment of that addition to our ways, how we want to adjust it, and also to support aftercare. Now, I know with alcohol, we're limited in how we could address that. So I'm hoping that it would free up more money in terms of addiction issues, as well as promoting healthy lifestyles. Because I know in our community and in Dene communities, we really have to be careful about our health, because we feel that there's a lot of issues environmentally affecting us, and people are having fears in terms of what we eat, what we drink, and apparently what we breathe, and the kinds of issues this might add to. We need to properly be funded. So I'm going to close now and thank you for coming to Port Resolution. I hope I did not bore you. I probably bored the community members because they know me. But I'm hoping that a lot of these discussions will take place in the coming months, and that you'll think about Port Resolution and our uniqueness in terms of how we will be impacted, and you would not forget us in terms of some of the issues that we brought forward here, because sometimes little communities get lost in transition. But I know that we had some good people who articulately spoke, and so we thank you. Masicho.
Thank you very much for that information. You've got a lot of questions that we're going to have to look at and try to get some information out there. But I think Mr. Simpson has been able to pull out the bill and was able to validate that I'll actually just turn it over to Mr. Simpson.
Thank you. And it was just the one question thing you brought up about if there's a passenger in a car, can they consume marijuana? And the proposed regulations say no person shall consume or use cannabis in a vehicle. So there can be no open containers of cannabis, and no one can be consuming it in a vehicle whatsoever. So that sort of addresses some of the issues I know with cigarette smoke and children in vehicles. I know that's something that a lot of people have wanted to outlaw up here, and so this addresses that as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Simpson. Right now, if there's no any other questions or comments, Ms. Marsh.
And that's a question. So the question was, what's an open container of marijuana? And that's a question that we've asked as well. And I think the answers we got were, well, people, they'll use their best judgment perhaps, and so when you're getting it at the store, I don't think it's going to be in tinfoil, but you know what, if you can grow your own plants, well, maybe it's in tinfoil, right? So no, that's a question that we've asked and we're looking into, and we're trying to get answers on that as well. But it's good to know that's a concern. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have a question in regard to health and social services and culture, education, and development. How are they preparing for the side effects of this bill being passed in the future? Like Simon mentioned education, and I was thinking, like, if they introduce it and make it mandatory in high school, they might as well do it right from elementary, because with this being legalized, it's going to be within homes in our community, and these children are going to be exposed to it, and eventually, because it's a controlled substance, they're going to be coming to school with side effects, and eventually that could lead to addiction. And I'm just wondering, like, do they plan on educating it in the school system so they're aware of long-term side effects and current side effects? Like, do they have something in process to be prepared for that when that happens?
So in the presentations we've heard from the Minister of Education, the Minister of Health and Social Services, they're developing an education platform to educate the people, just not students, but the residents of the Northwest Territories on the side effects, what is going to happen with this bill, what some of the side effects are with the cannabis, the effects on that. It's going to educate people. They're starting similar to what, I don't know if you knew it, but, the campaign about cigarettes and tobacco and that, don't be a butthead, similar. So, but they are working on a campaign to educate the residents and the students. Do we know what the campaign looks like right now? No, we haven't seen it. We know, we've been advised by both ministers that this is part of the process. It's, again, it's just not just one department. It's Justice is the sponsor of this bill, but it has an impact on finance, Department of Infrastructure, Health and Social Services, Education. So they're all working towards this. We now have some questions that would potentially, housing might have to be looking at this as well. And I'm most likely, I'm pretty sure they are. But again, it's these things that it's far-reaching across the government of Northwest Territories. So it's all departments, it seems like, and all departments seem to be working on, but the major ones are planning and are working on an education strategy plan.
And when that happens, would it be mandatory for like hamlets to be involved with their Métis or Treaty or whatever nationality they come from? Would they be welcome to attend that?
Yeah, so the education process is just not going, it's for all residents.
Yeah.
So whether you're a band council, Métis council, Hamlet council, it's open to everybody. It's the residents of the Northwest Territories, it's education. They're going to try to educate everybody as best possible. My understanding in dealing with the governments, I know with our bill, we've reached out to everybody that we can think of. We've looked at the list. It's over, I think it's 3 or 4 pages long, so we've gone out and to engage them and ask for their input. I would be assuming that the government of Northwest Territories uses similar lists to educate people and ask for people's input.
Do you think they would have did it before they went and agreed to pass the...
Well, okay, so the thing is that it's not that we agreed or didn't agree. Right now, the government, the federal government of Canada has passed, or in the process of passing it. So if we don't have a bill to address this, the default is the federal government. So the federal government's bill becomes the bill that has to be enacted. So this here gives an opportunity for each provincial and territorial government to come up with their bill that meets their needs within the regulations of the federal government, but also gives the opportunity for municipal governments to have a say in how they want to address it. So what we're trying to do is to develop a bill that meets our residents of the Northwest Territories' needs and concerns, to have the best impact for our residents. And so this is what our committee is trying to do, is get your guys' input to move forward. So as we move forward and when we finalize our report, we can report back to the government. The government has reached out with, I think Ms. Smirsh talked about an online survey. They've done that part. Now and they've done a report of what they heard. So now what we're doing is saying, okay, Bill 6 is now given to us for the second reading. Before we pass it, we're trying to get information at the bill, look at it. We have our concerns and our thoughts, but we're now listening to the residents of the Northwest Territories. Unfortunately, we're not hitting all 33 communities. We just had to make some choices, and we identified I think in the south we've identified 9 communities or 8 communities, and the north committee's identified 7. So we've got 16 communities that we're trying to get input, but we're also trying to give people the opportunity to provide feedback through our website, to provide written comments, and a lot of communities and individuals are doing that right now. So it's not the best solution, it's not the perfect situation, but the federal government are going to legalize it. Now we have to try to make the best of it and make something that works for us in the Northwest Territories. Good? At this point in time, if there's no other comments...
You had a question?
No. So if there's no any other questions or comments, I'll just turn the mic over to Mr. Natalie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to provide some comments, just basically sitting here and listening, but the point was made in terms of provided input into this whole discussions on Bill 6, and I think the context was, whether we're admitted smokers, non-smokers, but basically, if you are a smoker, then you're undertaking an illegal activity, and but the point is, how is this committee reflecting the reality of the situation that we all live in the NWT? For me, my perspective is to help with this legislation by taking a safety standpoint. How is this passing of this cannabis going to affect public safety, whether it's services that we receive in the community, services that we all take for granted. And so, because I'm a father, I'm a grandfather, so I want to ensure that what the services that this government provides, has integrity in ensuring that the best professional people are in those positions. For one, like peace officers, people that operate the heavy equipment in the communities. There has to be a guideline in place to ensure that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. So that's my perspective. Having gone through the tours of treatment centers, it was very clear that people wanted to see the reestablishment of the treatment center here in the NWT. Of course, addressing the core issues of the addictions and the social issues that we're facing with alcohol problems throughout the NWT. So acknowledging that, there's nothing stopping this committee of, hearing most of the concerns in the community meetings and people, outlining their perspectives in terms of trying to at least mitigate some of the negative things that we might experience with the passing of this legislation, that we could clearly outline the need for a treatment center. So that's, I understand, is the role of our committee, and it's nothing stopping us from also ensuring that this government has a clear maybe allocation of the revenues from the sales of say cannabis towards a public education exercise. So I think those are the recommendations that more likely this committee will consider very seriously, and ensure that we hear everybody's opinion throughout the NWT. Of course, we have to acknowledge too that we have a very short timeline. Like right now, it's April, and July is dawning here fairly quickly. So we have to do this tour and listen to people. A lot of the questions that you're asking too, sometimes our committee doesn't really have the answers. It's and our role too is to ensure that we work with the public, but also at the same time being mindful that on the other side, it's really the government that's moving on this and ensuring that all departments are working together, and sometimes it's us that need to ensure that those questions are answered. Just briefly too, I kind of see this as discussions on Bill 6, whether you support it or not, and I think the key question is, why do we need to legalize this at this point? I think the use of cannabis and marijuana has been going on for some time. It's been illegal, and throughout the world, I think there has been a liberalization of opinions and perspectives on the use of marijuana. So at this point, society is generally accepting of that practice, and the liberals, being a liberal government, saw an opportunity and they stepped forward, and they see it as a source of revenue for this government as well. So there is some economic opportunity associated with the passing of this legislation too. But I wanted to reassure people out there that our committee, we understand the social challenges that we all face at the community level. We've experienced firsthand growing up in our small communities, and we see the current realities of the struggles that our people face too as well. So I just wanted to reassure the public that we're here to listen and we'll do the best that we can to ensure that this legislation reflects a lot of the discussions that will take place. So with that, Masi.
Thank you, Ms. Nutley. So if there's no other further comments or questions from the audience, do members agree that the agenda item is concluded? Thank you. On behalf of the committees, I would like to thank everybody who joined us today. As MLAs, it is a privilege to be here and to hear directly from you. When we are making a report in the upcoming May-June sitting, as Mr. Nutley talked about in the Legislative Assembly, we will highlight the feedback we received during these meetings and further public consult or public submissions. If you have further questions about the bill or want to make a written submission, please talk to the committee clerk, Ms. Jennifer Frankie Smith there. You can also visit our website, which is www.assembly.gov.nt.ca. I will now adjourn this public meeting, but committee members, should you wish to talk to them individually, will stay around for a bit longer. Again, thank you very much. I would greatly appreciate and thank the community for resolution for accepting our invitation and coming out today. Thank you very much.